Well, this is episode 4. Good afternoon, everyone. We are actually not the smoothest entry that I've ever done, and I own that. But good afternoon, everyone. This is episode 4 of American Holidays. You might recall that we began this series last December by looking at Clement Clarke Moore's That 'Twas the Night Before Christmas, which we'll probably revisit next December when we do a much deeper dive into the history of Christmas. But in any event, this is the American Holidays series. It's related to the American Tapestry Project as we take a look at a major thread in the American tapestry, and that's the holidays, the things Americans celebrate as we try to discover America through the common objects of our love. What are the things that Americans, our political differences notwithstanding, what are the common objects of our love that make us Americans? And I think one of them is holidays. And as we have pointed out before, a quick reprise for those who haven't seen the earlier episodes, you can find them on the Jefferson's Facebook page and also on the Jefferson website. But each of these episodes are self-contained. There's no need to necessarily see them all or to see them in sequence. But as we mentioned in the earlier ones, setting up the series, how many holidays do Americans observe? Well, it's minimally 256, but there's another statistic I'll mention a little later in today's program. There are approximately 1,500 national days, or 4.1 national celebrations for every day in the calendar year. We'll come back to that observation in a moment. The series, as I said, we began with 'Twas the Night Before Christmas, and then in February we did Candlemas, Groundhogs, Chocolates, and Presidents. Last month in March we looked at particularly the immigrant thread, the celebration of America's immigrant heritage by looking at Columbus Day, and of course, a big deal in Erie, Pennsylvania, big deal everywhere, St. Patrick's Day. Today we're going to look at commercial holidays, or as they are sometimes called, and it's not necessarily a compliment. We'll talk about that as we go along. They're sometimes called Hallmark holidays, and there's, as that phrase is used, a wee bit of sarcasm around the word Hallmark. I have mixed feelings about that, and we'll look at that in a moment. Future episodes, I don't believe we have an episode in May, but in June we'll be looking at celebrating freedom, and then later in the summer and fall, state holidays, sporting holidays, and then wrap up the year with, of course, the two biggest holidays on the American calendar, Thanksgiving and Christmas. The common objects of our love is a phrase that President Biden used in his inaugural address that a number of people have picked up on. It was originally uttered by St. Augustine, who said, "A people, a nation, is a multitude of rational beings united by the common objects of their love." And so one of the objects, but not necessarily objects of our love, one of the goals, let me phrase it that way, of the American Holiday series is to ask ourselves at every critical point, when sometimes our politics gets a little frayed and sometimes interactions get a little frayed, what in fact are the common objects of our love? And I think we will discover that as Americans, we have much more in common, much more that would bind us together than we have that takes us apart. And that gets us into the common objects of our love. In my way of looking at it, they fall into 2 or 3 buckets: the profound and America's civil religion. And of course, the profound is life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And we're going to take a look at that next month in June, but also America's civil religion. The phrase civil religion was first coined by Robert Bellah in a 1967 essay. And he talks about how the American creed, that the second paragraph of the Declaration of Independence, we hold these truths to be self-evident, in many ways has also been absorbed by America's incredible religious pluralism, so that you find in America, religion actually is reinforcing patriotic feeling. And he called that the American civil religion, the values of the American creed. But there's also what I sometimes call the banal, but which is pop culture. And today we're going to take a real deep look at some pop culture items. And a question I've always had in my mind is pop culture strong enough to bind us together? And I think in some ways it is. And that'll be something maybe later at the end of the program, Ben, and you and I can bat that around. Because as we look at these common objects of our love, or at least these 2 or 3 big buckets, there's some questions to consider. what does what we celebrate, why we celebrate it, how we celebrate it, tell us about the American story and who we are as Americans. One of the things you're going to discover in commercial holidays, we really love food. Food is a big deal in American culture. Pop culture and commercialism, do they enhance or distort cultural appreciation? Today, we're looking at some holidays that are unapologetically commercial in their origin and their intent, but we're also going to look at a big holiday that is bigger than that. And that, of course, is Mother's Day. But pop culture and commercialism, do they enhance or distort cultural appreciation? And we'll maybe let that one ride until near the end of this of today's session. And then, how can understanding what we celebrate help us transcend the culture wars by recognizing the common objects of our love? And that, of course, is a theme that I've been emphasizing here these first 3 or 4 minutes. So let's take a look at American Hallmark Holidays. The phrase Hallmark Holiday, as I said, was, well, I don't know who coined it, but it is used in a kind of caustic, if not sarcastic way, and it refers to holidays whose primary purpose is nakedly commercial rather than a celebration of some tradition or historically significant event. What are some Hallmark holidays? Well, Happy Sweetest Day, Happy Administrative Professionals Day, Happy National Sons Day, National Teacher Appreciation Week, Happy Grandparents' Day, and Happy Bosses Day. And of course, Sweetest Day is October 16th. Sons Day is up here in the corner is September 28th. Bosses Day is October 16th, so you still have time to get someone a present. Administrative Professionals Day, we missed by a week. That was last Wednesday, April 21st. And National Teachers Day is May 3rd. Those are holidays that were really, quite frankly, created by people with unapologetic commercial intent. Big American holidays, we've looked at this before, and we can see a couple of those commercial holidays showing up. I didn't put the Super Bowl on there. Anybody who's been paying attention lately has watched the transformation of Halloween. Well, Halloween long ago, most people lost the connection with All Souls Day. Not everybody, but many people lost that connection. But you can see, and that's a chart we've looked at before. But let's take a look at some other national Hallmark holidays, commercial days. There is such a thing as the retail holiday calendar, which is part of a retail association marketing group. And they send this out to businesses so that businesses will know what days might be applicable for them to actually push their products. And so we have National Sibling Day. We have Happy Friendship Day. We have May the 4th be with you. We have American Beer Day, and right behind them, there's a beer stein, October 27th, American Beer Day. We have National Pet Day on April 11th, and we have National Sock Day, which I think is December 4th. I'm going to come back to that one. And of course, we have Book Lovers Day, which is near and dear to my heart on August 9th. But the two biggest raw, unapologetically commercial holidays are Black Friday and Cyber Monday. Those are designed to do nothing more than to sell, sell, sell. They would warm Willie Loman's heart, I suspect. And those are the biggest of them. Let's take a look at a couple of these national holidays. October 27th is American Beer Day. So no Guinness, no Heineken, no St. Pauli Girl. Budweiser is now in behind Ben and I's head is a guy posting a question mark. Budweiser, which was once upon a time called the King of Beers, is now owned by InBev, a Belgian company. So is it American beer? The oldest continually operates, still in business, American-owned brewery is Yuengling in eastern Pennsylvania. More to the point, if I were to encourage you on October 27th to raise a pint of American beer, I might suggest some locally brewed beer, such as Southern Tier or Erie's own Lavery's Brewery. But October 27th, National Beer Day. And what is the purpose of National Beer Day? It's to celebrate everything beer and, of course, to have a beer. April 21st. Well, as we mentioned a while ago, that was last week. That's Administrative Professionals Day. It was founded in 1952 by Henry F. Clemfuss of Young and Rubicon Advertising Agency in New York City. It was originally called National Professional Secretaries Week and National Secretary Day. And Clemfuss invented the holiday because he was having a hard time hiring secretaries. And the reason they were having a hard time hiring secretaries is, and this could be misconstrued, so hopefully no one will misunderstand what I'm saying, but immediately after World War II, although there were many women who had entered the workforce during World War II and had every intention and every desire to remain in the workforce, there was also a little thing called the baby boom, in which there was an enormous increase in the birth rate in the late 40s and early 50s, and women left the workforce, and therefore hiring secretaries was difficult. So, well, Clemfuss meant to honor and celebrate secretaries. He was also trying to amp up the profession so that he could get more job applicants. As I said, we have National Sock Day on December 4th. National Sock Day, according to the literature surrounding it, celebrates that rarest of all lasting unities, the marriage of matched socks. It was created by a millennial company, Ben, that should be dear to your heart. Pair of Thieves, a company that manufactures clothing for the under 30 crowd, founded National Sock Day to celebrate the Broadway revival of 1954's On Your Toes. And for some reason, I've not been able to track this down, but it's on their webpage, but they don't explain why. It was to celebrate the Judds' last concert. So I'm going to go out on a limb and guess that the Judds' last concert occurred on December 4th. In any event, National Sock Day has as its goal to sell socks. But in fairness, Pair of Thieves, the company, gives 250,000 pairs of socks a year to the homeless and people in need. So they are actually a charity. And of course, there's May the 4th be with you, National Star Wars Day, which is May 4th. The first time it was ever uttered, actually it doesn't have anything to do with American culture, but maybe one of our Global Summit speakers, Niall Gardner, may have an opinion of it, probably for about 30 seconds. But the first time May the 4th be with you was ever uttered was in an advertisement in the London Evening News placed by a conservative group congratulating and celebrating Margaret Thatcher's first day as the Prime Minister of England. And the ad said, "May the 4th be with you, Maggie. Congratulations." The first May the 4th be with you holiday was in Toronto in 2011. And on Star Wars Day, May the 4th be with you, in 2015, the astronauts in the International Space Station watched Star Wars. And since Disney has now purchased from George Lucas or Lucasfilms the Star Wars franchise, they are running with it, and you can expect to see more. But most of the commercial holidays, not all of them, but many of them celebrate food. And as I was putting this together, I thought of a comment Kelvin Trillin, who used to be a writer for the New Yorker, made, and he could be sometimes waspish in his humor, but I think he actually meant it good-natured. He said in a debate 30 or 40 years ago on immigration policy, he said if it was up to him, he would base immigration policy upon national cuisine, and that he would let everyone in but the English. And then he said he was only joking. He actually likes fish and chips, and he is a big roast beef guy. But food days, there are tons of them, such as National Spaghetti Day on January 4th, National Pizza Day on February 9th. One that caught me a little off guard, National Turkey Neck Soup Day on March 30th. We also have April is National Grilled Cheese Month, and I believe April 12th is National Grilled Cheese Day. So before the month is out, you've got 2 more days. Have a grilled cheese sandwich. National No Diet Day is on May 6th, excuse me, is National No Diet Day. You have Happy National Donut Day. We're going to discover there are 2 National Donut Days. You have National Chocolate Covered Anything Day, and that I think is December 16th. You have National Chocolate Chip Cookie Day on August 4th, National Cheeseburger Day on September 18th. National Meatloaf Day is the October 18th. This probably, for the generationally challenged, I have to explain, this is Dagwood Bumstead, the husband in the comic strip Blondie, who was legendary for his Dagwood sandwiches that he would stack up. If you watch Diners, Drive-Ins, and Dives, that definitely requires a hunch. And National Sandwich Day is November 3rd. And then, of course, perhaps the granddaddy of all American food days is National Hot Dog Day, which is the third Wednesday in July. And hot dogs, an interesting history. I'm wondering how many people, I'll ask Ben if he knows the history of the hot dog.
Andy, I don't know the history of the hot dog, but I can't wait to learn it. But I will confess right now, I'm super hungry in the middle of this program.
National Hot Dog Day, which is the third Wednesday in July, celebrates the hot dog, but hot dogs came to America from an English, not a German, contrary to what many people would have thought, an English immigrant, Harry Stevens. 100 years ago, Major League Baseball was not a particularly profitable sport. Crowds were low. Baseball teams didn't make much. A big crowd in those days would be 4,000 people. There's a famous anecdote that when Yankee Stadium was opened, the day it opened, the house that Ruth built, they had 70,000 in attendance. The next day they had 8,000. The 8,000 was even a big number because the stadiums knew. Average attendance on a weekday, not a Saturday, on a weekday would have been in the 3,000 to 4,000 range, and the St. Louis Browns used to average 700, 800 people. Baseball owners were desperate because actually in many places you couldn't play on Sunday. But in any event, Harry Stevens, notwithstanding, saw an opportunity. He thought fans would like to have a snack. And so he experimented with various sandwiches, and he discovered that a sausage in a roll retained its warmth, its heat, longer than any other sausage he could come up with. And so he began to sell at the Polo Grounds and at Yankee Stadium in New York, Red Hots, which were an immediate sensation and success. And they got the nickname hot dogs from Red Hots. It was kind of disparaging because one of the rumor was that their major constituent was in fact dog meat. Hot dogs then was invented as baseball with Harry Stevens. He ended up he made a fortune. He made more money than the baseball owners because he ended up having the concessions that there were three in those days, all three New York teams, the two Chicago teams, Philadelphia and Boston. And that is where the American hot dog came from. Other days, for example, January 4th is National Spaghetti Day. Now, I assume most people listening know that spaghetti in Italian means thin string or twine. Here's an interesting statistic. Americans consume 20 pounds of pasta a year. 20 pounds of pasta a year per person. That actually doesn't sound as high. The first time I saw that number, I thought, oh, that's a lot. Maybe that's not as much as it sounds, actually. According to legend, Marco Polo brought spaghetti back to Italy from his journeys to the East. There's some debate whether or not that's quite true because Arab cultures had a thin grain-based noodle sometime around the 12th century. But of course, the Chinese had what we would call pasta since at least 5,000 BC. And if you're counting, that's 7,000 years ago. So the Chinese are really the inventors of pasta. Thomas Jefferson brought it to America. He experienced what he called macaroni. He called it, and actually in Italy, it is still frequently called macaroni, pasta being a little kind of upscale way of describing it in menu jargon. Thomas Jefferson loved it so much that he got the recipe and he brought the recipe back to America with him. And he became such a fan of macaroni that the British, during the American Revolutionary War, most people, I think some people might know this, Yankee Doodle Dandy was at first a satirical British anti-American song. You know, the wore a feather in his hat, be a Yankee Doodle Dandy, I forget the exact phrase, macaroni. was an attempt to insult the Americans for their early love of macaroni. And actually, the Americans just co-opted the British, took the song and made it their own. February 9th is National Pizza Day. And you might be interested to know that in addition to National Pizza Day, the umbrella day, there are at least 5 other National Pizza Days. We have on September 5th, National Cheese Pizza Day. On April 5th, National Deep Dish Pizza Day. On the third Friday in May, National Pizza Party Day. National Pizza with the Works Except Anchovies Day is November 12th. And National Sausage Pizza Day is October 11th. And I have to make a mental note to make sure I have a pizza with sausage on October 11th. Pizza was invented in Naples, Italy, sometime around the year 1000. The first American pizzeria was Lombardi's in New York City in 1905. 3 billion pizzas are sold in America every year. Roughly 9 pizzas for every man, woman, and child in the country. Americans eat 46 slices or 23 pounds of pizza per person per year. September 18th is National Cheeseburger Day. There is also National Hamburger Day on May 28th and National French Fries Day on July 13th. National Cheeseburger Day celebrates the invention of the cheeseburger, which it turns out to be, as many things, it started in California. Sometime in 1924-25 at his restaurant in Pasadena, California, Lionel Sternberger was made a hamburger for a homeless person who was outside taking some compassion. And the homeless person asked him if he might please put a piece of cheese on it. Sternberger did, and hence, according to legend, was born the cheeseburger. At least that's the legend at Sternberger's restaurant in Pasadena, California, which of course, unfortunately no longer exists, but that's where the American cheeseburger began. There are 2 National Donut Days, June 4th, if we spell it D-O-N-U-T, and November 5th, if we spell it D-O-U-G-H-N-U-T. Donuts were a Dutch pastry. Washington Irving, and you'll recall from the Christmas episode, Washington Irving essentially invented how Americans celebrate Christmas. I can't say he invented donuts, but he may have been instrumental in popularizing them, because in Washington Irving's Knickerbocker History of Old New York, he refers to a pastry that was essentially sweetened dough that was deep fried. In New York Dutch Knickerbocker slang, they were called olie cakes. And of course, they are one of the legacies of America's Dutch immigrants. So if it's donut, D-O-N-U-T, for the spelling challenged, it's June 4th. For the purist who can spell it, because it truly is a donut, small pastry, it's November 5th. And then October 28th is National Chocolate Day. It was created by the National Confectioners Association to sell chocolates. It's celebrated either on October 28th or July 7th. There seems to be a competition. Chocolatiers seem to be a feisty group. They seem to have different arguments. We won't get into that competition in Erie history, but in any event, there's 2. We'll go with October 28th. And as I said earlier, in terms of all these days, there are over 1,500 national days for one thing or another, or an average of 4.1 days celebrating something for all 365 days in the calendar. Well, those are kind of fun things. And when we talk about Hallmark holidays, what's the harm is the way I look at it. And it's a way of celebrating the things we all enjoy. And if it keeps some people employed, that's a bonus. A little more serious holiday, but also a holiday that has some interesting commercial overtones we'll talk about. And there's a touch of sadness, actually, in the commercial overtones we'll talk about later, is, of course, Mother's Day, which is coming up in a week and a half on Sunday, May 9th. Mother's Day, as celebrating mothers, has a deep, deep history in in world culture. If we go all the way back to the Stone Age, this is a photograph of the Venus of Willendorf, which is a Neolithic carving that celebrates woman and fecundity. If we go not quite so far back to Cybele, the mother of the gods in Greco-Roman culture, again, a celebration of fecundity. She was known as the Magna Mater, the mother of the gods. And then we find a version of that in the Roman festival of Hilaria, in obviously in Roman times, celebrating motherhood, but also celebrating womanhood. And then we see how that kind of morphs into Later Sunday, and I hope I pronounced that correctly, the fourth Sunday of Advent in the Christian tradition. And we've talked about it a couple of times in some of these programs about the Christianization of pagan religions. I'm not so sure that's entirely appropriate here, but one of the things that's interesting is that Mother's Day, which is celebrated globally, is always celebrated in the spring. And those roots go back to these ancient times. Fourth Sunday in Lent, priests wear rose-colored vestments because there's a relaxing of the Lenten restrictions of the purple vestments. But that Later Day gave rise ultimately to Mothering Day, Mothering Sunday, which really is getting very, very close to what Americans would think of as Mother's Day. And of course, Americans' Mother's Day was the product of these two women. And we're going to come back to them as we go on. This is a mother-daughter combination. This is Anne Reeves Jarvis, and this is her daughter, Anna Maria Jarvis. And Anna Maria Jarvis can be called the foundress or the mother of the American Mother's Day. And we're going to take a closer look at them. As I said, you have ancient roots. Cybele was the great mother of the gods in Greco-Roman culture. The name predominates since roughly 500 BC. In Roman culture, she's called the Mater Deum Magna Idea. That is, Idea meaning resident or occupant of Mount Ida in Crete. She represents universal motherhood, the whole notion of mother as the giver of life. She is not only the mother of all humans, she is the mother of all gods, the mother of all humans, and the mother of all beasts. And because of that, her celebrations tended to be orgiastic, and she was a symbol of fecundity and fertility. The Roman versions of those celebrations, the Roman festival of Hilaria, was a day of merriment and rejoicing, celebrating the return of the spring. And it had, as you might suspect from these two famous paintings depicting it, it celebrated fecundity rather openly. But it also had a great element of joy and rejoicing, and a lot of tomfoolery associated with it. And although the connection is very vague and no one is quite sure, it also seems to be associated with April Fool's Day, or the founding of April Fool's Day. April Fool's Day is an ancient custom, and we all know what April Fool's Day is, playing practical jokes on your friends. It's been observed, perhaps not since time immemorial, but since certainly the first millennium, and its true origins are not really known or understood where they came from, but it is, to the extent anyone has been able to trace it out, it is connected to the Roman festival of Hilaria. Well, as we move forward, that again takes us to Later Sunday, which is the fourth Sunday of Lent. Later in Latin means rejoice, give thanks for your blessings. It comes directly from the introit, which is the introduction to the Mass. And of course, the introit says, rejoice ye with Jerusalem, and be ye glad for her, all that ye that delight in her. Exult and sing for joy with her, all that ye in sadness mourn for her, that ye may suck and be satisfied with the breasts of her consolations. That's the opening of the service. And it's again a celebration of not so much mother, but as the maternal instinct and the giving of life. It is still to this day recognized in the Roman Catholic, Lutheran, and Anglican denominations. Over time, however, the Christian Later gave rise to Mothering Sunday. And at first, it had nothing to do with motherhood. It dates back to at least the 16th century. And what it was a celebration was on the fourth Sunday of Lent, the devout would go a mothering, which meant they would go to their mother church the main cathedral. So to use an example that for Erietes, if you're a Roman Catholic Eriete, but you happen to live in Fairview or Corey or even Oil City or somewhere else, on Mothering Sunday, you would come to the service at the cathedral in Erie at St. Peter's. If you're an Episcopalian, you would come to the Cathedral of St. Paul on 6th Street. You came to the Mother Church to celebrate. But over time, Mothering Sunday began to wither. It was primarily celebrated in England and in Great Britain, but in England in particular. And over time, it began to wither and fall out of custom until in the late 19th, early 20th century, Constance Penswick Smith worked to revitalize it. And she brought it back as a holiday. But interestingly enough, Mothering Sunday, as Penswick Smith reinvented it, didn't have that same connotation of going to the mothering church. It became a celebration of motherhood, and then ultimately got subsumed in the English-speaking world and then globally by the Mother's Day festival that was in fact created by the founders of the American Mother's Day, Anna Marie Jarvis and Ann Reeves Jarvis. There are some other claimants to the title of the founder of Mother's Day. Julia Ward Howe, for example, she of Battle Hymn of the Republic fame, in 1870, advocated that for a day dedicated to mothers. And she said, "Arise then, women, on this day. Arise, all women who have heart, whether our baptism be that of water or of tears. We women of one country will be too tender to those of another, to allow our sons to be trained to injure theirs from the bosom of the devastated earth." And she was talking about the American Civil War and the Franco-Prussian War. And for Julia Ward Howe, her attempt to create a Mother's Day was for mothers to disarm the military and to celebrate peace. Other claimants for founding Mother's Day would be Juliet Blakely, who on May 11th, 1877, at her church in Albion, Michigan, the pastor, in the middle of his homily, or in the middle of his sermon, the pastor was suddenly distracted and had to go attend to something. And she was in the front pew and asked her to come forward. And she then just took over the service on May 11th, note the date, gave such a wonderful service that her sons decided to honor her on every subsequent second Monday in May by honoring their mother and honoring all mothers. This one, if Pat Cudio, our colleague, is watching, a Notre Dame University alumni, is Frank Herring, who was, I'm not sure he was the original, but he was the football coach at Notre Dame in the late 19th, early 20th century. He was also a faculty member at Notre Dame. And on February 7th, now this was February, not May, 1904, made the first known, as you can see this plaque, which is on Monument Circle in Indianapolis, the first known public plea for a nationwide observance of Mother's Day. And it was made by him in commemoration of Mother's Day, and in honor, he did it at a Fraternal Order of Eagles convention. And then Mary Tal Sassine of Henderson, Kentucky, as early as 1877, began to celebrate Mother's Day in her classes and began to lobby and argue for the creation of a national day honoring mothers. But none of those four, Howe, Blakely, Herring, and Sassines, took. What took was Anna Marie Jarvis's determination to honor her mother, Ann Reeves Jarvis. Ann Reeves Jarvis, the mother, is an amazing woman, actually. She was a social activist and community organizer during the American Civil War. She lived in Grafton, West Virginia, and she actually created, in many ways, the very first Mother's Day. Ann Reeves Jarvis had a very difficult life growing up in Grafton as a married woman in Grafton, West Virginia. She bore 13 children over a period of approximately 16 years, only 4 of whom survived to maturity, mostly because of hygiene issues and challenges with water. Throughout her life, Ann Reeves Jarvis strove to honor and help mothers. And one of the things she did was she created Mother's Day work clubs, so that when she began Mother's Day, It wasn't a day to have candy and flowers. It wasn't a day to celebrate. It was a day for the women who had had some good fortune to go out and help those less fortunate. Because she had had so many children die, she was particularly interested in hygiene and cleanliness and teaching other women how to care for their children. Then during the Civil War, those of you who are Civil War buffs will know West Virginia was obviously the western part of Virginia, but it opted to stay in the Union and broke away from the state of Virginia and was quickly recognized as a state. But there were fratricidal, might not be too strong a word, tensions within the communities, even in the hill country of West Virginia, there was divided loyalty. So after the Civil War in 1868, Anne Reeves Jarvis began what she called Mothers Friendship Clubs, in which she would bring together Unionists and Confederates and have picnics and celebrations in which they would play the Star Spangled Banner and Dixie, and they would end singing, interestingly enough, we talked about this in a book notes, Auld Lang Syne, remembering the old times, not the old times of the Confederacy, not the old times of the Union, but the old times when the community was one. So Anne Reeves Jarvis, the mother, is the inspiration for Mother's Day. Her daughter, Anna Maria Jarvis, is the actual founder of Mother's Day. Anna Maria Jarvis did that in 1908. But whereas her mother, and perhaps it was the example of her mother's 13 children, only 4 of whom survived, Anna Maria Jarvis never became a mother, never became married. And some of the literature on the relationship between the mother and daughter suggests that there was a kind of estrangement between the two. I don't find it that convincing, but it's possible. Anna Maria Jarvis, unlike her mother, was a modern woman. And with her mother's support, she went to Mary Baldwin University. When she left Mary Baldwin University, for a time, she worked as a teller in Chattanooga, Tennessee. She came back home to Grafton, but once what's the line? Once you've seen the big city, you can't stay in the small town. She moved to Philadelphia, where she got a job at the Fidelity Life Insurance Company, and she rose to an executive level as their director of advertising and copywriting. This is not Anna Marie Jarvis. This is, I don't know who this person is. It's just from Wikimedia. It's an example of a professional woman circa 1900. But Anna Marie Jarvis would have probably looked reasonably like that. She became an immensely successful businesswoman. She lived in Philadelphia. Her brother also lived in Philadelphia, they owned the Quaker Cab Company. And a lot of people want to make the argument that there was some kind of estrangement between mother and daughter, but they had a lengthy correspondence. They never lost contact with one another. But Anna Maria Jarvis never married, never had children. Ultimately, she got her mother to move to Philadelphia with her. But as I say, there's some lack of clarity in the different sources I was reading. But I'm not going to say there was a rupture between the two, but they lived very different lives. Anne Reeves Jarvis was your archetypal small town mom and community caregiver. Anna Maria Jarvis was a 20th century woman. She went to the big city, and in her case was an immense success. She founded Mother's Day when her mother died in 1905. She founded Mother's Day to honor her mother because she remembered a sermon, a Sunday school sermon her mother gave in 1876. I hope, this is Anne Reeves Jarvis at a sermon she gave in 1876. I hope and pray that someone sometime will found a memorial Mother's Day commemorating her for the matchless service she renders to humanity in every field of life. Well, that's exactly what Anna Maria Jarvis did to honor her mother. Her mother died in 1905. In 1906, she had a memorial service offered for her. And in 1907, another private service. But the beginning of the American Mother's Day is usually attributed to May 10th, 1908, when Anna Maria Jarvis had 2 simultaneous services honoring her mother. one in her mother's church in Grafton, West Virginia. And there you will, to this day, find the shrine of eternal motherhood at that church in Grafton, West Virginia. She had a service offered for her mother at the Methodist Church, Andrews Methodist Church in Grafton, West, and she sent 500 white carnations to honor her mother and honor the women of Grafton. She simultaneously had another service in Philadelphia. And that is the beginning of American Mother's Day. Anna Marie Jarvis then began, remember, she was in advertising and marketing and promotion. She began a drive to create American Mother's Day. In 1908, Congress rejected a proposal and even joked about Mother-in-Law's Day. But by 1911, all states observed Mother's Day, and the very first to officially make it a state holiday was West Virginia. And then in 1914, May 9th, 1914 to be exact, Anna Maria Jarvis got what she wanted. President Woodrow Wilson declared that the second Sunday in May would be celebrated henceforth and forevermore in America as Mother's Day, a public expression of love and reverence for the mothers of our country. Now, the sadness that I mentioned earlier that comes in is, for Anna Maria Jarvis, Mother's Day was a religious holiday celebrating motherhood and the sacrifices of mothers. She took great exception to the commercialization of Mother's Day. And it gets complicated because the American Florist Association, greeting cards manufacturers, candy confectioners began to seize upon Mother's Day as an opportunity for sale. So we have this commercial thing, and they began to expropriate Anne Reeves Jarvis, Anna Marie Jarvis's mother, as a symbol of this. And Anna Marie Jarvis fought that. In fact, she fought it so strongly. She opposed greeting cards. For example, she organized protests against Mother's Day. Once she even got arrested for breaking the peace for protesting Mother's Day. She was appalled by ready-made greeting cards. A printed card means nothing except that you're too lazy to write to the woman who has done more for you than anyone in the world. She didn't believe in chocolates. You buy your mother a box of chocolates, then you eat most of them. And she took great exception to the flowers. Remember, she had sent her mother white carnations. Well, the florist, white carnations also are associated with death. The florist decided they were going to sell two different kinds of flowers: red carnations to living mothers and white carnations to place on the graves of deceased mothers. Anna Marie Jarvis took great exception to the commercialization of what she wanted to be a religious holiday. And the sadness that comes in, of course, is, I mean, she lost, the woman who created Mother's Day attempted to have Mother's Day canceled. She lost that struggle. And there is, as I said, a touch of pathos. She died penniless in the Marshall Square Sanitarium in Westchester, Pennsylvania. She had exhausted all her earned wealth fighting the commercialization of Mother's Day. She died broken blind. Little touch of irony. Who paid for her care in the sanitarium? Individuals associated with the floral and greeting card industries paid for her support. So there's a kind of, I think there's a certain element of pathos in that, that it ended that way. She thought she was creating a religious holiday to honor mothers and their sacrifice. And the irony, of course, is she's an advertising copywriter and the director of marketing, or whatever the title was exactly, for a life insurance company. So there's a touch of pathos in that. But Anna Maria Jarvis invented the modern American Mother's Day in honor of her mother, Anne Reeves Jarvis. And actually, we end up today with Mother's Day, and we could take a look at, the gifts. And I would actually, if I could, I would say to Anna Maria Jarvis, exhale, you did good. The commercialization, it still does what you're trying to have done. It still is an honor. It is honoring and celebrating mothers. This mug is kind of obscured by Ben and I, but the nutritional value of mother, 100%, 1,000% unconditional love, 500% patience, 100% hard work, 110 to 100% of multitasking, 1% sleep, 150% caffeine, and no regrets is the makeup of a mom. I'm going to actually ask Ben, for the mothers who might be watching or anyone who might want to do this. I think one of the best one of the best evocations of the meaning of Mother's Day was written by the contemporary American poet Billy Collins, and it's called The Lanyard. So Ben, I'm going to stop talking for a minute. If you would do the honors.
Yeah, I'd be so happy to do that, Andy. I really appreciate that. And I appreciate you embracing Collins. You and I have had conversations again and again. I'm a huge fan. And you actually just wrote a recent book notes addressing Billy Collins' poetry. So I'm really honored. Thank you for asking me to do this. This is The Lanyard by Billy Collins. The other day, I was ricocheting slowly off the blue walls of this room, moving as if underwater, from typewriter to piano, from bookshelf to an envelope lying on the floor, when I found myself in the L section of the dictionary, where my eyes fell upon the word lanyard. No cookie nibbled by a French novelist could send one into the past more suddenly. A past where I sat at a workbench at a camp by a deep Adirondack lake, learning how to braid long, thin plastic strips into a lanyard, a gift for my mother. I had never seen anyone use a lanyard or wear one, if that's what you did with them. But that did not keep me from crossing strand over strand again and again until I had made a boxy red and white lanyard for my mother. She gave me life and milk from her breasts, and I gave her a lanyard. She nursed me in many a sick room, lifted spoons of medicine to my lips, laid cold face cloths on my forehead, and then led me out into the airy light and taught me to walk and swim, and I, in turn, presented her with a lanyard. Here are thousands of meals, she said, and here is clothing and a good education, and here is your lanyard, I replied, which I made with a little help from a counselor. Here is a breathing body and a beating heart, strong legs, bones, and teeth, and two clear eyes to read the world, she whispered. And here, I said, is the lanyard I made at camp. And here, I wish to say to her now, a smaller gift, not the worn truth that you can never repay your mother, but the rueful admission that when she took the two-tone lanyard from my hand, I was as sure as a boy could be that this useless, worthless thing I wove out of boredom would be enough to make us even.
Thanks, Ben. I think that's really a wonderful poem about the imbalance between a mother's and a father's, or a parent's love, in this instance, a mother's love and a child's gratitude. You just take it for granted, and some people, Anna Jarvis apparently didn't take it for granted, and I only wish she could have died happier because she did a good thing. I'm not so sure she died thinking that. There is a Father's Day. St. Joseph's Day is March 19th. It's been celebrated in the Roman Catholic Church for 2,000 years. But Father's Day, as we understand it, is the creation of Sonora Smart Dodd, who lived in Spokane, Washington in the middle of the 20th century. She advocated that she was very fond of her father, and one Mother's Day, she thought there should be a Father's Day. And so she began a movement to create Father's Day. She lobbied for her own Father's Day, but the ministerial alliance of the church that she belonged to in Spokane, they chose the third Sunday in June. Father's Day waxed and waned a little bit, but ultimately began to get traction. And in 1966, President Lyndon Johnson declared it a national holiday. And in 1972, President Nixon, so it is a relatively new holiday, President Nixon made it permanent as the third Sunday in June. So that's Sonora, and that is Sonora Smart Dodd, the creator of Father's Day. Grandparents' Day is even newer. Russell Capper, who was 9 years old in 1969, wrote a letter to President Nixon advocating Father's Day. Unfortunately, Nixon brushed him off, said he couldn't do anything about it. Actually, I don't know if Nixon ever even saw the letter. It came from Nixon's secretary, Rosemary Woods. Marion McQuaid, interestingly enough, of West Virginia again, lobbied for the holiday with her local U.S. representatives and senators, and President Jimmy Carter on August 3rd, 1978, proclaimed that henceforth and forevermore, the first Sunday after Labor Day, the first Sunday in September after Labor Day would be Grandparents' Day, and there we are. So that's a quick run through Hallmark holidays. Some people take a caustic attitude, as this neo-Victorian card says about these commercial holidays, and of course there's a lot of cards. Hallmark holidays, Hallmark cards, American greeting, a lot of cards have been sold. Social media, there is such a thing as a social media holiday calendar. My attitude towards them is a little bit similar to my attitude towards, in some ways, the commercialization of Christmas. As long as you understand what you're celebrating, why not have a good time while you're celebrating it? So send your mother flowers, or your secretary, or your administrative assistant, or whatever gift seems appropriate, particularly if you're sending them to me. So I'm a chocoholic, you could send me chocolates. But in any event, I think actually the commercial holidays, well, sometimes you might wish that they weren't quite so ubiquitous. All in all, it is Americans celebrating the things they love and putting aside their squabbles for a moment to have a hot dog on National Hot Dog Day. And the next time you have a hot dog, think of Harry Stevens and the Polo Grounds in the 19 teens. So, concluding, happy Mother's Day, happy Father's Day, happy Grandparents' Day. Those are American commercial holidays, and out of all of those commercial holidays, the food days and everything, you do end up with three very worthy holidays and very worthy celebrations. Next month, actually it won't be next month, it'll be in June, we'll look at celebrating freedom, the great freedom holidays that we celebrate in this country, Memorial Day, Juneteenth, and obviously the 4th of July. Thank you. And that's our presentation on commercial holidays, which for us is pretty good, Ben, under an hour.
I was going to say, Dr. Roth, wow, what an accomplishment. So much that we got through there. And I really appreciate, as always, you taking the time to give us the history behind these holidays and to weave them in, pun fully intended, to your American Tapestry project, what these teach us, what these show us, what we stand to learn from them. And I don't say that being biased for this particular program, featuring a Billy Collins poem. I love Billy Collins, and then also a lot of highlighting of West Virginia, my birth state, and a lot happening there. So appreciative of that as well. I want to go back to one of the questions and in earlier slides, and we've talked about this, and let's look here at this context. And I think you did some great wrapping up at the end, but I'd like to hear you again on it, of looking at the what we celebrate. So what does what we celebrate, why we celebrate it, and how we celebrate it? Tell us about that American story and who we are as Americans, because that's what you've been after, digging deeply into the American narrative, taking a look at that with your American Tapestry project. So what does the what, the why, and the how teach us about the who when it comes to Americans?
That's really a good question, Ben. Mother's Day, I'm not so sure about, because actually, Mother's Day, as we pointed out, not Mother's Day as we celebrate it in America, although the American way of celebrating Mother's Day has, interestingly enough, probably through the power of American media and entertainment over the last 75 years, become the way in which the world now celebrates Mother's Day. I made that comment about Mothering Sunday in England and Catherine Penswick Smith bringing it back, but with a slight different emphasis. Rather than going to your mother church, it was to celebrate motherhood. But actually, Mothering Sunday in England got swamped by Mother's Day. And if you were to look at a calendar, Mother's Day is everywhere. Mother's Day is a commercial holiday because of florists and chocolatiers and cards, as we heard with the sadness with Anna Maria Jarvis. But looking at those other days, I think every time I look at the food, one of the things I think, we're having a big argument right now about immigration in America. And that's If everyone wants to calm down, I would at least offer this. That's an old argument in America. It's as old as the country. So that in some ways, there's nothing new about it. It doesn't make it any more pleasant. That doesn't make it any less volatile. And I do understand that the country is beginning to fill up, and we have to figure out how long. Well, we haven't had an open door since 1924, almost 100 years. The first really serious Immigration Act is the Immigration Act of 1924. But I made that comment about Kelvin Trillin. And I think in terms of what Americans love and how we are trying to create a people in America, one of the things is to look at, and all joking aside, I mean this as a no, I'm not even semi, forget the modifier. I mean this as a serious observation. Look at American cuisine. We have arguably the richest cuisine in the world. I remember 50 years ago, my father coming home with a pizza. And he said, I was just bought this pizza. The girl behind the counter was Japanese. The fellow who owned it was African American. And the other guy was an Irishman, and me, I'm German. He said, this can only happen in a, and there wasn't, his point was there wasn't an Italian in the room. You know, and that can only happen in America. And so, you know, all joking aside, I see that with the food, and then the other things we celebrate. We looked at Valentine's Day and Groundhog Day. We talked last month about specifically ethnic holidays, and you do get into questions of cultural appropriation, which the very phrase kind of gets under my skin, to be quite honest, because of course it's not appropriation. It's just it's a mutual celebrating. I talked about it in a book notes. Joe Lepore had an interesting observation. In the normal course of events, a people, a nationality, after a long period of time, come together, blend into a people, and then they create a government. Perhaps the government's imposed on them, but to use the American version, they create a government to organize themselves because they understand, and we don't need to get into big government, small government, but they need to understand at some level we have to pose some order on this. She made the interesting observation that in America we reversed the natural order. We created a government in 1789, but yet we had not yet created a people. And initially, the question was, could Virginians learn to become Americans? Could people from Massachusetts, could Mainers, could Yorkers, as they were called, could Pennsylvanians give up their allegiance to their colony or state and become Americans? George Washington succeeded in doing that. You could argue that Thomas Jefferson maybe never quite completed that journey. In last week's book notes, I pointed out that I think you can argue quite convincingly, and not to get too controversial, that Robert E. Lee didn't finish that. But we're still in the process of creating Americans. And so I would argue, to get back to commercial holidays and food, one of the ways you create people is the things you celebrate. And one of the things that if you want to get people to relax and be calm with one another, get them down around the table, feed them something, and let's talk. And so over food, you can actually bring people together. So I think in some of these holidays, we start from that. We started really basic things and work up. Poor Anna Jarvis, the more I learn about her, the sadder I feel for her. But who can oppose Mother's Day? I'm sure there's somebody out there. I don't really want to hear from you, but who can oppose Mother's Day? So you start with the things that are in agreement, and you build up from there. That's what I'm seeing in these holidays, the things we celebrate. Now, next month, or I guess it is June, when we talk about celebrating freedom, some of those holidays are loaded, and we'll talk about that.
I think that that speaks to, who we are, what we choose to celebrate, how we choose to celebrate it, when we choose, and when in our timeline we make those adjustments. And in the last episode, and reminding people watching that these aren't necessarily sequential. You don't have to watch, parts 1 through 3 to understand 4, but this certainly helps when you can see them all and how they play off of each other. But to go back for anybody who may have missed it, on demand streaming at jesserie.org, people can see the last episode when we were talking about ethnic holidays. We were talking about how, we've seen the transition of Columbus Day and its origins as a holiday
Yeah.
to celebrate Italian Americans, and then returning that to Italian Americans, taking the emphasis off of Columbus solely, and being able to look at that, but then also looking at the awareness of our own awareness, look at ourselves in the mirror as Americans, and to say we ought to too give recognition to indigenous peoples and to be able to celebrate them. And so I think the holiday becomes deeper and wider, not necessarily watered down, as we evolve it and we look at it differently. And I can't help but think, when talking about the commercialization of the holidays, I've heard you say time and again, Andy, and correct me, I'm trying to paraphrase here. We want to be Jeffersonians, but we live in Alexander Hamilton's world. We're operating in his world, and I can't help but think that the national bank is one of the things that brings us together as a country, just even out of its functionality, that we all have a common money and a common system, and that's really a federal approach, and that
Yeah.
really makes us a one people using a $1 in terms of how we operate here. And then we see the commercialization of holiday, how that brings us together, purchasing for, being gifted and receiving, but the idea that these are commercial.
And I agree with you. And, Calvin Coolidge was probably wrong. The business of America is not business. Actually, it's not. Calvin Coolidge allegedly said the business of America is business, although there's no evidence of anybody ever hearing him say that, and it's nowhere in anything he ever wrote. So regardless of whether Silent Cal said that or not, I mean, the America is, we live in a commercial country, which is okay in some ways. We need to do a better job at equality. Again, politics could come into that. But that has created a kind of well-being that is no longer rare in the world, fortunately for everyone. But I do think all of that comes together as we learn more and more about these holidays and about their origins. We learn more and more about ourselves. And one of the interesting things is, as we learn more and more, perhaps there's some things we leave behind, perhaps such as Columbus Day. But as we leave that behind, that isn't necessarily doing anything wrong, because one, as you pointed out, Columbus Day was not originally meant to celebrate Columbus. It was actually Italian Americans who were being discriminated against in the early 20th century, making a statement of ethnic pride, and he was an obvious person to make. So that Columbus Day is gradually morphing into Italian American Heritage Day. And as we learn more and more about Columbus, we also learn more and more about why there was an Italian American Heritage Day. And we learn more and more about why there's all these ethnic heritage days. The episode in the American Tapestry Project on immigration pointed out that immigration to America follows the same pattern as since the beginning. Somebody who has the nerve to come comes through great peril, great stress, great travail. When they get here, they're not necessarily welcomed with open arms, but somehow they persevere, they find their niche, they begin to succeed. Then their children become much more assimilated, much more involved, and their grandchildren. And I always make the joke, this is maybe at the end of this program, we don't want to get into something this heavy, but I'll finish the thought. I'm wondering what the know-nothings of the 19th century and the anti-Catholic immigration opponents of the early 20th century, 100 years ago, would think of. Forget politics, we're just talking pure ethnicity, would think of the current composition of the United States Supreme Court, where you have 5 or maybe 6, depending on Gorsuch, might be an Episcopalian, but he was raised Catholic, where you have 5 or 6 Roman Catholics and 3 people of Jewish heritage. Not a Protestant in sight. And that's actually America. That's not a bad thing. In fact, that is one thing I think everybody can agree on, even in our culture wars. Forget, the ideological mindset of any individual justice. No, I have not ever heard anyone in all of our fractious contemporary politics say that's a bad thing. In fact, most people don't even know it until it's pointed out to them.
And I think that what a note to end on. I want to save that for a fuller conversation, which it so deserves. And you do cover it in the AMTAP project available on WQLN, Public Media, NPR One app, videos we've discussed, at the JES. But the ever expanding definition of American, what it means to be an American, and that we're adding more entries, we're not condensing it, we're not taking away, we're really looking at the growth and the expansion of that. But Dr. Andrew Roth, scholar in residence at the Jefferson Educational Society and host of the American Tapestry Project on WQLN Public Media, with episodes available on that NPR One app. Thank you for sharing your insight and knowledge with us, taking the time, energy, and effort to do it here in the American Holiday series. Thank you. And of course, folks, to all of you, thank you, Andy. To all of you watching along at home, whether you're watching live in real time or you're tuning into a streaming on demand, a later broadcast, listening to a later broadcast, thank you. Without you, these programs do not happen. Of course, for more information about JES digital programming and publications and so much more, head over to our website, jeserie.org. There you're also going to find videos of the past presentations to stream on demand from this series and so many more, nearly 170 of them now, as well as a whole wide range of publications from quick timely reads to essays, reports, and more. And of course, the book notes series by Dr. Andrew Roth. You can find that there as well. Nearly 60 of them to date you're going to find. And of course, be sure to like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter and Instagram, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. For the Jefferson Educational Society, I'm Ben Spagan. Be safe, be sound, and thanks for listening and learning with us.
Thank you.